Jake Peterson had been to a lot of auctions in his life, but nothing quite like this. The auction hall on Meridian 7 was massive, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch forever. Thousands of people, or things that looked like people, crowded the floor. Some were actual aliens with tentacles and strange skin. Others were humans like him trying to make a living out in the galaxy. The air smelled like ozone and something metallic that Jake could never quite identify. He walked through the rows of items being auctioned off. Most of it was complete junk. There were piles of corroded alien technology that probably hadn't worked in centuries. Solar panels that were half melted, barely worth the metal they were made from. Electronic components that sparked randomly. Broken ship parts that nobody had any use for. Jake had learned long ago that 99% of what showed up at these auctions was worthless. You had to have a good eye to spot the 1% that might actually be valuable. That's when he saw it. Lot 847 sat on the display screen and Jake literally stopped walking. It was a ship. Not just any ship, a massive Class 5 galactic cruiser. The design was old, really old. Ancient even. According to the description scrolling across the screen, it came from the Valerian Empire, a civilization that had disappeared thousands of years ago. Nobody even knew what happened to the Valorians. They were just gone. One day they dominated entire star systems and the next day nothing. No ships, no people, no trace of them anywhere. Jake leaned closer to the display reading the inspection report. His heart sank a little as he read the words. Structurally unsalvageable, it said in bold red letters. The report went on to explain that every expert who had looked at this ship had the same conclusion. The systems were dead. Nothing worked. No modern species, the report claimed, could even figure out how to interface with the ship's technology. The Valorians had built something so different, so alien in its design, that contemporary spacefaring civilizations simply couldn't make heads or tails of it. It was a beautiful museum piece, but as far as actually using it went, it was a brick. The auction started. Jake watched as Lot 847 came up on the block. The auctioneer, a tall Zolthian with blue skin and 3 eyes, began the bidding. He started at 50,000 credits. Nobody raised their hand. He dropped it to 30,000. Still nothing. He went lower and lower, getting more desperate with each price reduction. 20,000. 10,000. 5,000. Jake raised his paddle. A Zelthian trader near him, a nasty-looking creature with scales and what looked like too many teeth, laughed out loud. It was a mean, cruel kind of laugh. You're actually bidding on that piece of trash? The Zelthian said. That ship is completely worthless. Every expert in 3 star systems has confirmed it. Jake didn't respond. He just kept his paddle up. A corporate representative from something called the Collective, a huge organization that ran most of the trade routes through this part of space, stepped forward and sneered. Kid, you're wasting your time. And your money. The representative turned away and walked toward other lots. The bidding went back and forth for maybe 30 seconds. Another trader tried to outbid Jake, but only half-heartedly. Nobody really wanted this ship. After just a few bids, Jake won it. The final price was 40,000 credits. He had spent more than that on his apartment back on Earth years ago before he'd left the planet to try his luck out here in space. Jake felt a rush of excitement and nervousness mixed together. He just made a huge commitment. Most people would call him crazy. That night, he contacted his partner, Rebecca Walsh. She worked on a different space station, managing the financial side of their salvage business. When Jake told her what he'd done, she actually screamed. You did what? Rebecca shouted through the communication line. Her face on his screen was red, and Jake could tell she was genuinely upset. Jake, that's insane. You spent 40,000 credits on a ship that doesn't even work? That multiple experts have already said is completely broken. Jake understood why she was panicked. 40,000 credits was real money. It could have paid for repairs, supplies, crew salaries. But Jake had a feeling about this one. He couldn't explain it in a way that would make sense to anyone else, but he knew something they didn't. Those old Valerian designs didn't just break down randomly. They didn't fail because they were poorly made or outdated. No, Jake had a hunch that was based on years of studying old salvage reports and alien technology. Those Valerian designs were waiting. They were waiting for the right person to come along and unlock them. And Jake was betting everything that he might just be that person. Jake stood at the entrance of the Valerian cruiser with his team, and honestly he was nervous. Rebecca had flown in from her station the moment she realized he was serious about this purchase. David Brooks, their lead engineer, had come too. They all wore spacesuits just in case the atmosphere inside the ship was toxic or non-existent. Nobody knew what they were walking into. The airlock hissed as they pushed through it. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. The ship felt dead. Completely dead. The walls were a dark metallic gray, covered in symbols and designs that didn't match anything Jake had ever seen before. Dust floated in the air, untouched for what must have been centuries. Then they reached the bridge. The moment Jake stepped through the bridge doors, something incredible happened. The lights flickered on. Not gradually. Not slowly coming to life like old equipment waking up. They just blazed to life instantly, flooding the entire bridge with a soft blue glow. Jake stopped dead in his tracks. Nobody had touched anything. There were no switches to flip, no commands to give. The ship had just activated. What the... David started to say, but Rebecca cut him off. Wait. Don't move, she whispered, pulling out a small scanning device from her suit pocket. She ran it across the nearest console, her eyes growing wider with each passing second. Jake, this is impossible. This is completely impossible. Every system just woke up. All of them. At the same time. Jake stepped closer to the main view screen. Outside, he could see the auction station in the distance. Inside, the bridge was coming alive. Screens flickered on one by one. Data started scrolling across displays. Symbols appeared and disappeared. The ship was doing something, processing something. I think. Jake paused, trying to figure out what was happening. I think the ship is scanning us. That's when Rebecca figured it out. She looked at her scanner, then back at Jake. The ship's AI. It's ancient, incredibly advanced, but it's still active. And it's detecting something. It's detecting us. Our neural patterns, I think. Our brains. The Valorians built this AI to recognize specific biological signatures, and somehow it recognizes human neural patterns. David walked up to one of the technical stations and examined it carefully. This technology is nothing like anything we have. Look at these components. They're so old, but they're also so perfectly preserved. Like they were built to last forever. The ship seemed to respond to their presence. On the main display, a holographic interface materialized. It showed information in symbols Jake couldn't read, but below that, words appeared in actual English. The AI was translating itself, adjusting its language to communicate with them. The ship knows we're here, Rebecca said, her voice filled with wonder. It's trying to talk to us. That's when things got really interesting. Shield generators throughout the ship hummed to life. On the tactical display, barriers materialized around the ship. Barriers made of pure energy that shimmered with an ethereal blue light. The shields activated automatically, as if the ship was protecting itself now that it had detected a presence aboard. Oh my God, David breathed, staring at the readouts. Look at the power output. Look at it. This is insane. This is completely insane. The weapon systems came online next. Jake watched as massive targeting arrays appeared on every screen. Weapon specifications scrolled across displays, specifications that made absolutely no sense to him. The power levels were off the charts. The firing ranges were measured in light years, not miles. The accuracy ratings were near perfect. Jake had never seen anything like it. These weapons. David pulled up more detailed specs on his personal device. These aren't like anything in our arsenal. They're not like anything any modern military has. The Valorians built something that makes our best weapons look like children's toys. But the most shocking discovery came from the propulsion systems. David pulled up the engine specifications and literally whistled. It was a low, impressed whistle that echoed through the bridge. Jake, Rebecca, you need to see this. The propulsion specs on this ship, the speed capabilities, this thing can move faster than anything we've ever built. Way faster. We're talking about speeds that break every law of modern physics. Speeds that shouldn't even be possible according to current scientific understanding. Rebecca looked at Jake and he could see the realization dawning on her face. This wasn't just a salvage find. This wasn't just some old broken ship they could strip for parts and sell for scrap metal. This was something revolutionary. This was something that could change everything. The Valorians didn't build junk, Jake said slowly, understanding flooding through him. They built masterpieces. And they built them to last. The auction purchase that seemed crazy just hours ago had suddenly become something far more valuable than anyone, including Jake, had ever imagined. As he stood on that ancient bridge, surrounded by technology that defied modern understanding, Jake realized he was holding something that could reshape the entire balance of power across the galaxy. And nobody else knew about it yet. Jake thought he could keep the discovery quiet. He was wrong. By the time 48 hours had passed, everything had fallen apart. Somehow word had gotten out about the Valerian cruiser. Maybe it was a station worker who saw something on the docks. Maybe it was a transmission that got intercepted. Maybe someone had just put two and two together and figured out what Jake had found. It didn't matter how the news spread. What mattered was that it did spread, and it spread fast. Jake's communication channel started going absolutely crazy. Messages flooded in. Demands, threats, offers, ultimatums. Every single major power in this part of the galaxy suddenly seemed very interested in the ship that had been gathering dust in an auction lot just 2 days ago. The collective came first. Their military ships appeared near the station without warning. Massive vessels with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. The commander's message was brief and to the point: hand over the Valerian cruiser immediately. This is not a request. Then came the corporate entities. Companies with names Jake had never even heard of before started sending offers. Billions of credits. Actual billions. They wanted the ship. They wanted the technology. They wanted whatever Jake had found inside. The offers kept climbing higher and higher, as if money could solve anything. But the most shocking development came from the Zenithian Council. The Zenithians were an ancient civilization that had been around for tens of thousands of years. They controlled vast stretches of space and had governments and laws that governed dozens of star systems. They typically didn't even acknowledge humans, let alone communicate with them directly. Humans were seen as new arrivals in the galaxy, upstarts who hadn't earned their place at the table. And yet the Zenithian Council sent an official message. The Valerian cruiser must be surrendered to the Zenithian Council for the security of all galactic civilizations, the message stated. It was written in formal official language that made it sound like this wasn't a request either. It was a demand backed by the authority of an ancient government that had the power to enforce it. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. He was just one human. What could he possibly do against all of these forces? Against governments and corporations and military ships? Then Rebecca found something. She'd been spending hours inside the ship's archive systems, trying to decode the Valerian databases. The ship's AI had been gradually helping her, translating things, explaining concepts in ways humans could understand. Most of what she found was technical specifications and engineering data. But buried deep in the oldest files she found something else. Historical records. Personal logs. Messages from the Valorians themselves. Rebecca called an emergency meeting in Jake's quarters on the station. When she arrived, her face was pale. She looked like she'd been crying or was about to start. "Jake, I found something," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Something huge. Something that explains everything about why the Valorians disappeared." She pulled up files on the display screen. Ancient text filled the screen, symbols that the ship's AI had translated into English. As Rebecca read through them, the story became clear. The Valorians hadn't just disappeared. They hadn't abandoned their ships and vanished into some other dimension or something equally mysterious. The truth was much darker. The Valorians had been hunted. Other civilizations had banded together and hunted them to extinction. Why? Because the Valorians had discovered something. Something so revolutionary, so incredibly powerful, that it threatened to upset the entire balance of power across the galaxy. The Valorians had found a way to harness energy at levels that should have been impossible. They'd created technology that made other civilizations look primitive. They'd become too powerful, and the other ancient governments couldn't allow that. So they had worked together to destroy them. "The cruiser isn't just a warship," Rebecca explained, her voice getting steadier as she talked through what she'd discovered. "It's a time capsule. It's a message in a bottle from a civilization that was destroyed. And it holds something incredible. It holds the keys. The keys to technologies that could literally reshape the entire galactic power structure. It holds the information that made the Valorians so powerful. And now we have it." Jake sat back in his chair, the weight of it all pressing down on him. He wasn't just sitting on a valuable salvage find anymore. He was sitting on something that governments would kill for. Something that civilizations would go to war over. Something that could change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. And now dozens of forces wanted it. Military ships were already moving into position. Corporate security teams were being mobilized. Political pressure was mounting. People were starting to ask questions about this mysterious human who had somehow obtained the most valuable artifact in known space. Jake looked at Rebecca and realized the truth. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't just about making a profit on a salvage find. This was about survival. This was about whether he and his team could protect what they'd found, or whether they would be crushed by forces far more powerful than themselves. "What do we do?" Jake asked quietly. Rebecca took a deep breath. "I don't know. But we better figure it out fast." Jake Peterson stood on the bridge of the Valerian cruiser, staring at the incoming military vessels on the tactical display. There were 3 of them. Massive ships belonging to the collective, each one bristling with weapons. They were closing in fast and their communication channels were blaring warnings. Surrender or be destroyed. That was the message. Simple and clear. He had maybe 10 minutes to make a decision that would either save him or get him killed. Rebecca was beside him, her fingers flying across the console as she ran final checks on the ship's systems. David was down in the engine room, making sure everything was running at peak performance. They all knew what was about to happen. They'd talked about it for the last 6 hours, going back and forth, debating their options. Sell the ship. Hide it. Run away. Leave the galaxy entirely. But in the end, Jake had made up his mind. Do it, he said quietly. Rebecca nodded and began the sequence. The communication array activated, broadcasting a signal across every major communications channel in known space. Every government, every corporation, every space station, every ship with a receiver would see what was about to happen. Jake was about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. The first collective vessel fired a warning shot. A massive energy beam shot across space, barely missing the Valerian cruiser. It was a warning. A demonstration of power. A message that said, "We're serious about this." Jake waited. He let the tension build. He let the collective think for just a moment that maybe their warning had worked, that maybe he would surrender after all. Then he activated the shields. The barrier of pure energy erupted from the ship like a wave of blue light. It expanded outward, creating a dome of protection around the entire vessel. The second the shield was fully activated, the collective fired again. This time it wasn't a warning shot. This was a full attack. A massive energy barrage that should have torn the Valerian cruiser to pieces. Instead, the beam hit the shield and simply stopped. The energy dissipated harmlessly, spreading across the barrier like ripples in water. The shield held firm. It didn't flicker. It didn't weaken. It held strong enough to stop weapons that could normally vaporize a small asteroid. On every communication channel across known space, people watched. They watched as the collective fired again and again. They watched as the Valerian cruiser's shields held against every single attack. They watched as impossible became possible. Then Jake made his next move. The ship's engines roared to life. The Valerian cruiser suddenly accelerated, moving with speeds that shouldn't have been possible. According to every law of physics that modern scientists understood, nothing that large should be able to move that fast. The ship should have torn itself apart from the stress. The crew should have been crushed by the G-forces. But there was nothing. Just smooth, incredible acceleration that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew. The 3 collective vessels tried to keep up. They couldn't. They fell behind almost immediately, left in the dust of a ship that was moving faster than anything they'd ever encountered. Jake pulled up the targeting systems and felt the power flowing through the ship like electricity in his veins. Targeting the weapons arrays, David's voice crackled through the communication system from the engine room. He sounded excited, maybe even awed by what was happening. The Valerian cruiser's weapons systems locked onto the 3 vessels. Red targeting reticles appeared on each one. Jake could have destroyed them. He could have fired, and all 3 ships would have been vaporized in seconds. Years of research and development, millions of credits spent on construction, thousands of lives aboard each vessel. All of it could have been erased. Jake didn't fire. Instead, he did something far more effective. He disabled them. Precise, surgical strikes hit each ship's weapon systems. Energy banks overloaded and shut down. Targeting computers fried. Defensive shields flickered and died. The 3 most powerful military vessels the collective had ever built were suddenly defenseless, floating in space like sitting ducks. And it had all taken maybe 90 seconds. The message was unmistakable. Jake wasn't just showing off. He was demonstrating a fundamental truth that the entire galaxy needed to understand. Humanity wasn't what everyone thought it was. Humans weren't primitive. Humans weren't inferior. Humans weren't meant to be pushed around or enslaved or treated as second-class citizens. Given genuine technology, humans could compete at the highest levels. Humans could win against civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Humans could stand toe-to-toe with the most advanced militaries in known space. The response was immediate and shocking. Some governments went completely silent. They simply stopped broadcasting, stopped communicating. They were shocked into silence. Other powers sent new messages, but this time not military commanders. Diplomats. Politicians. They wanted to talk, to negotiate, to understand what had just happened. A few alien factions even sent proposals for alliances and trade agreements. They wanted to work with humans. They wanted to be on the right side of whatever was about to happen next. Rebecca looked at Jake from across the bridge, and a slow grin spread across her face. "We just changed everything," she said, her voice full of wonder and excitement. "Jake, we actually just changed everything." He nodded, watching as the balance of power in the galaxy shifted before his eyes. One human. One ship. One decision to stop running and start fighting. The stars would never be the same again. 6 months had passed since the demonstration that changed everything. Jake Peterson sat in his office on the newly established human research station orbiting Kepler Station, looking out at the stars. His desk was covered with data pads, contracts, and proposals from governments and corporations across the galaxy. 6 months ago, he was a desperate salvage entrepreneur with a crazy idea. Today, he was running one of the most important organizations in known space. The Valerian cruiser had become legendary. News of what Jake had done spread like wildfire across every communication network in the galaxy. Within weeks, the ship had become a symbol. A symbol of human potential. A symbol that humans weren't the primitive upstarts everyone had always assumed. A symbol that given genuine technology, given real opportunity, humans could compete at the highest levels of galactic civilization. Governments that had previously dismissed humanity were now scrambling to establish relationships. The Zenithian Council, which had demanded Jake surrender the ship, sent formal apologies and requests for partnership. The collective, whose ships Jake had disabled, proposed trade agreements. Even smaller alien factions that humans had never heard of before were suddenly very interested in working with Earth's representatives. But Jake didn't stop with just the one ship. He realized something crucial after the demonstration. The Valerian cruiser wasn't unique because it was special. It was unique because humans were special. Human brains worked differently than alien brains. Humans could interface with ancient technology in ways that rigid, structured alien minds simply couldn't. It was like humans had been designed by nature to unlock mysteries that had been hidden for thousands of years. So Jake started buying. He began acquiring other impossible wrecks. Ships that had been deemed unsalvageable by every expert in the galaxy. Vessels from civilizations that had disappeared millennia ago. Technology so ancient and so foreign that nobody could figure out how to make it work. Jake's team would board these ships, and the same thing would happen over and over again. The ancient systems would activate. The technology would come alive. Secrets that had been locked away for thousands of years would suddenly be accessible. Each discovery revealed something incredible. A mining vessel from the Zaldar Empire contained propulsion technology that could cut travel time across the galaxy in half. A research station from the Krell Collective held medical technology that could cure diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. A defensive platform from the Valorians' ancient rivals contained energy manipulation techniques that could revolutionize power generation across known space. David Brooks had become the head of a massive research initiative. He led teams of human engineers working side by side with alien scientists. It was a strange combination at first. Aliens from dozens of different species, all working with humans, all trying to understand technology that defied conventional wisdom. But it worked. The human intuition combined with the systematic knowledge of ancient alien scientists created something completely new. They were making discoveries at a pace that shocked everyone. Rebecca Walsh had transformed into something else entirely. She was no longer just Jake's partner. She had become humanity's de facto ambassador to the galaxy. She traveled between star systems, negotiating with governments, establishing trade agreements, building relationships. Her name appeared in official documents and treaties. She represented humanity at galactic councils and diplomatic summits. Sometimes Jake had to remind himself that this was the same woman who had screamed at him for buying that worthless ship 6 months ago. The auction purchase that should have bankrupted Jake had instead become the turning point for humanity's entire future. Jake thought back to that day on Meridian 7. He thought about standing in that crowded auction hall, watching as everyone dismissed the Valerian cruiser as worthless junk. He thought about Rebecca's panicked voice when he told her what he'd done. He thought about the moment the ship's systems activated, how impossible it had seemed. He thought about the military ships, the threats, the moment he decided to stand and fight instead of run or hide. One human. One ship. One decision to believe in something that everyone else couldn't see. That's all it had taken to change everything. The stars, it turned out, had been waiting for humans all along. They'd been waiting for a species that could think differently, that could adapt quickly, that could see possibilities where others saw only problems. The Valorians had disappeared thousands of years ago, hunted to extinction by civilizations that feared their power. But they'd left behind a gift. They'd left behind ships and stations and technology that would only work for the right kind of mind. The human mind. Jake received a message on his communication device. It was from a government on the far side of the galaxy. They wanted to establish a research partnership. They wanted to work with humans. They wanted to be part of what was happening. He smiled and began typing a response. Outside his window, the stars shone bright. Thousands of them. Maybe millions. Countless possibilities waiting to be discovered. Jake realized that this was just the beginning. The journey had only started. With each ancient ship they activated, with each lost technology they recovered, with each alliance they formed, humanity was writing a new chapter in galactic history. The age of humans as second-class citizens was over. The age of humans as galactic explorers, scientists, and leaders had just begun. And it all started with one man crazy enough to buy something that nobody wanted.